Now, there is, verse 6, great gain in godliness with contentment. So now he switches over and says, they falsely think there is great gain in godliness. But he says there is a different kind of great gain in true godliness. And the way he defines true godliness is godliness with contentment. Contentment is largely having the right expectations, knowing God to be fully faithful, knowing that all things will work out in eternity, but also knowing that not everything will go our way in this life. We will not always profit financially. And we will have hardships, we will have adversity, but out of that adversity, God is bringing Christ-likeness. For we brought nothing into the world, verse 7, and cannot take anything out of the world. But, verse 8, if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content, which is pretty amazing as a statement. Food and clothing, by the way, the word is for covering, so probably includes shelter along with clothing. Verse 9, but those who desire to be rich fall into temptation. Well, if you're a follower of Jesus, you don't want to fall into temptation. You know you're going to have temptations, but you don't want to fall into them. And into a snare. The snare is next, and a lot of translations will say trap. A trap. It's like an animal getting caught in a trap. That's not good. Into many senseless and harmful desires. So you got many of them, and they're senseless and they're harmful. Some translations foolish. You don't want to fall into foolishness. And these senseless and harmful desires plunge people into ruin and destruction. Now, that's just verse 9. We're going to look at verse 10, but I mean, just pause and think about this. There's already, depending on how you count it, 5, 6, or even 7 different components of this that are warnings against terrible things. Think about those you advise in money matters. You do not want to tempt them or lead them toward or point them toward these self-destructive consequences of the desire to be rich. In fact, that word that's translated plunge is a word that's often translated drown. I mean, plunge people, drown them in ruin and destruction. That's what can happen and does happen with money love, with turning money into an idol. An idol is anything we put in front of God. For the love of money, not money itself, but the love of money is a root of all evils. Now, your translation, like mine, probably says is a root of all kinds of evils, but the original actually says the love of money is a root of all evils. Kinds of just sort of mitigates it and minimizes it and sort of reduces the intensity of it, but it's not in the original language, and therefore it's not inspired. The love of money in some way is a root of all evils. It connects to every evil that is done. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith. So there's another result of money love. Wandering away from the faith, wandering away from Christ, turning your back on the Lord because the desire for money has taken over in your life. So some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs, or some translations say, pierced themselves with many griefs. That is not what anyone wants, but it is what happens when the desire to be rich is pretty much a major, prominent thing in our lives. If you want to be rich, this is what you're going to face.